Let me ask you something that nobody asks out loud. What if you are not failing? What if you are simply not finished? We live in a world that has made quitting respectable. We call it setting boundaries. We call it knowing our limits. We call it self-care. And sometimes it is generally so. But sometimes, if we are really honest, it is just exhaustion wearing a reasonable disguise. I want to talk about that moment. You know that one. It is not the moment of dramatic crisis. It is quieter than that. It is that Tuesday morning when you wake up and realize that you have been praying the same prayer for 3 years and nothing has moved. It is the slow realization that your efforts, though they are sincere, they're sustained, they're costly efforts, they appear to have produced absolutely nothing. That is the moment that most people stop. Not with the dramatic declaration, but just a gradual, almost imperceptible loosening of the grip. And I want to suggest to you that this moment, this specific moment of exhausted, near surrender, may be the most spiritually significant moment of your life. And here is why. It is easy to become discouraged when we are worn out and we are weary. It is equally disheartening when our consistent effort appears to yield no results. When we have done everything right and the situation has not moved an inch. And that is the moment that most people quietly stop. But listen to what Jesus says in Luke 18:1. He told them a parable to his disciple to the effect that they ought always to pray and not lose heart. Did you catch that? The master himself, who knows everything about human weakness, teaches his own disciples to always pray and not lose heart. Not sometimes, not when you feel like it, always. And then Jesus goes on to tell a story about a woman with no power, with no influence, and no reliable hope. And she needed justice from a judge who had built his entire career on not caring what anyone thought. No fear of God, no concern for public opinion. A man who had essentially made himself untouchable. She had nothing except one thing. She would not stop. She kept coming back day after day, not because she had a strategy, not because she could see progress, but because stopping felt like a betrayal of something that she could not even fully name. So she kept showing up at the courtroom with the same request, the same need, the same desperate persistence. And the judge, this hard, cold, untouchable man, eventually looked up from his indifference and said, in essence, I give up. I want you to pause for a moment on that. The most powerful person in that story was the one with nothing but perseverance, the one who refused to let exhaustion make her decision for her. And now here is what wrecks me about this parable. Jesus tells it and then immediately says, if this woman's persistence could move a corrupt human heart, do you honestly think it will not move the heart of a father who loved you enough to give everything that he had for you? The logic is almost unfair in its beauty. If the worst case scenario, an unjust judge with a hardened heart, eventually yields to persistence, then what exactly are you afraid that the best case scenario, a perfect father who calls you his own, will do with your cause? And yet, we stop praying. Not all at once, gradually. The prayers get shorter, then they get less frequent, then they get more mechanical, and then one day we'll realize that we have not really talked to God in weeks Not really. Not the way you talk to someone that you trust with the thing that is actually breaking your heart. And I know this pattern personally. After nearly 5 decades of walking with God, I can tell you with absolute certainty that every dark season of my soul was preceded by a thinning of my prayer life. Every time, without exception. The prayer did not dry up because my heart grew cold. My heart grew cold because the prayer dried up. And prayer is not what you do when you feel close to God. It is what keeps you close to God. And there is a difference. And it took me years to understand it. So, what do you do when prayer feels like talking to a wall? You keep talking. Not because you feel it, not because you can see evidence that it is working, but because the alternative, a life navigating your deepest needs in your own strength, is something that you have already tried. And you know exactly how that ends. As Charles Spurgeon used to say, God often delays in answering prayer. Why the delay? To deepen our desire. And sometimes also he wants to work in us, to shape us, to form us before he works for us. And sometimes he simply wants to display his grace in a way that will leave us breathless with amazement when he finally arrives. And there is a question that Jesus asked at the end of this passage that I cannot overlook. He looks forward to his own return and he wonders out loud, will I find faith on earth? Not success, not impressive ministries or large congregations or documented miracles. Faith. The quiet, stubborn, unsexy kind that keeps showing up at the same courtroom with the same request, even when nothing appears to be happening. And that is the faith that he's looking for. So, here is what I want to leave with you. You do not know how close you are. That is the part that nobody tells you. Your finish line is not visible from the track. You cannot see it from where you're standing. The woman in Jesus' story did not know that the judge was one conversation away from yielding. She just knew that she was not done. And you're not done either. Whether you have been praying about that relationship, that child, that situation that has not moved in months or maybe even in years, you're not done. The delay is not denial. The silence is not the final answer. And the exhaustion that you feel right now may not be a signal to stop. It may be the last mile. So hold on. Keep praying. Do not let tiredness make the decision that only faith should make. You may be one conversation away from the judge looking up and say, I give up. If you have a story about perseverance, please share it down below so that others may also be edified. Love you guys and gals, and Lord willing, I catch you next week.